Housemaid saves millionaire's son from fatal accident. He called her Mommy. Austin, Texas. A warm March afternoon, buzzing with life. Families were strolling down the sidewalks, kids riding bikes and laughing near the downtown park. Sophia Ramos, 29, was walking home after her shift at Morgan Tech, one of the city's sleekest office towers, where she had worked as a janitor for nearly 2 years. With her bag still slung over her shoulder, Sophia had just picked up a few groceries from the corner store across the street. She always took this route. Tall trees lined the road, birds chirped overhead. It made her long days feel a little lighter. But today, everything changed in a matter of seconds. From across the street, a man's panicked voice rang out, "Lucas, no!" A small blonde-haired boy, maybe 4 years old, suddenly broke into a sprint across the crosswalk, chasing after a barking golden retriever. He had slipped out of his father's hand, running straight into traffic, just as a black SUV barreled down the road at dangerous speed. Sophia didn't hesitate. She dropped her bag and ran. Horns blared, tires screeched. Sophia shut her eyes, reached the boy, grabbed him, and curled her body around him, rolling them both to the side just in time. The SUV slammed its brakes, swerved, and crashed into a nearby light pole. The impact was deafening. Sparks flew, power flickered on the entire block before cutting out. But the two bodies on the asphalt, they were still breathing. Sophia was lying over Lucas, her breath shaky, arms scraped, her knee bleeding, but her eyes full of relief. "It's okay. You're safe now," she whispered, gently brushing hair from the boy's forehead. Lucas stared at her with wide, clear eyes. "Mommy?" he asked, then threw his arms tightly around her. The man who had screamed earlier, Caleb Morgan, rushed forward, collapsing beside his son. "Oh my God! Lucas, are you all right?" His voice cracked, then he turned to Sophia. His eyes filled with shock. A complete stranger, someone he had never met, had just risked her life to save his son. And now the boy was calling her Mommy. Caleb stood frozen. Sophia hadn't even managed to get up. People began to gather. Someone called 911. The SUV driver climbed out, trembling. Bystanders shouted at him. Sophia remained seated on the pavement, still cradling Lucas in her arms. Lucas wasn't crying. He sat quietly, his head resting against Sophia's chest, tiny fingers clutching the hem of her shirt, as if he never wanted to let go. It was the first moment, but it was the beginning of everything that was yet to come. At the ER of Austin Memorial Hospital, Sophia sat quietly on a folding bed while a nurse treated her wounds. Her knee was bleeding, her palm scraped raw from sliding on the asphalt. Yet she didn't cry out. She didn't take her eyes off the little boy sitting beside her. Lucas. He hadn't let go of her hand since the accident. Every time someone entered the room, he eyed them cautiously. Except Sophia. Caleb stood in the corner, silent and overwhelmed. Too much had happened in less than an hour. A near-death accident, his son calling a complete stranger Mommy, and now the boy refused to leave her side. "You're okay now," Sophia whispered to Lucas, her voice soft as wind. "The doctors will take care of me. You can go with your dad." "No," Lucas shook his head, pulling her hand closer. "I want to stay with Mommy." Caleb stepped forward. "Lucas, she's not—" "Don't," Sophia interrupted gently, looking up at him. "Let him stay a little longer. He's still scared." He looked at her closely, maybe for the first time. A woman with a tired but kind face, brown hair tied back neatly, eyes that somehow felt familiar. "Have we met before?" he asked. Sophia nodded slowly. "I work at your building, Morgan Tech." "Morgan Tech? I've never seen you." "I clean in the afternoons, from floor 1 up to 20. I usually reach your floor at the end of my shift. You're already gone by then." Caleb blinked. Floor 20, the executive level. "And Lucas?" He turned to his son. The boy looked up, almost as if he understood. "She's the cleaning lady. I talk to her when Miss Letty falls asleep." Sophia lowered her eyes. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interfere, but—" Some days he stood alone in the hallway, staring at the ceiling. He always asked about his mom. Caleb froze. His heart sank. "I just said comforting things, that his mom was an angel watching over him, that she loved him every day." Lucas whispered, "She said I'd have a new mommy, an angel my mom would send." Sophia's eyes widened. I was only speaking generally, about angels. I didn't mean—" Caleb nodded slowly. A strange emotion rose in him. Surprise, gratitude, and a quiet ache he thought he had buried long ago. The woman in front of him hadn't just saved his son's life. She had been the one silently comforting his child when he hadn't even known. 3 days after the accident, Caleb called Sophia. "Could you come to Morgan Tech this afternoon?" His voice was soft but serious. "Lucas keeps asking for you. He won't eat unless you're there." Sophia hesitated. She didn't want to cause more misunderstandings, but when she thought of Lucas, the way he clung to her that day, she couldn't say no. That afternoon, Sophia arrived at Caleb's office around 3 p.m. She wore a simple white blouse and dark jeans, not her usual janitor uniform. As she stepped into the 20th floor lobby, curious glances followed her, but Caleb quickly came out to greet her. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. Inside the office, Lucas spotted her and shouted, "Mommy!" He ran toward her like a flash. He hugged her tightly and began telling her everything that had happened in the past few days, like they had always been family. Sophia laughed gently, patting his head with care. 2 hours passed quickly. They drew pictures, built towers, sang simple songs. Caleb watched from a distance. It had been so long since he'd seen his son smile that wide. Before she left, Caleb spoke up. "Would you consider coming back a few times a week, not to work, just to spend time with Lucas when he's here at the office?" Sophia hesitated. "I'm not a nanny." "I know, but you bring him peace. I'll pay you double your current rate. Just 2 hours, 3 times a week." Sophia blinked. That was a lot of money. But it wasn't the money. It was something deeper. She nodded. "I'll give it a try." From that day on, Sophia became Lucas's special friend. 3 times a week after her cleaning shift, she came up to the 20th floor to play with him. They drew pictures, read books, and sang "Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star," the song Lucas said his mama used to sing. One day, Lucas crawled into her lap and whispered, "Do you know how to make paper airplanes?" "I do. My real mommy made them too." Sophia froze. "I miss my son," she thought. If he had lived, he'd be around this age. That night, alone in her tiny apartment, Sophia held the drawing Lucas had given her, 2 figures holding hands, with scribbled words, "Lucas and Mommy Sophia." Her heart felt heavy, not from sadness, but from a quiet, growing love. A love she thought she'd never feel again. As for Caleb, each time he watched them together, he felt something shift in his chest. He didn't know when it started, but something inside him was beginning to change. On a quiet Saturday morning, the doorbell rang at the large Westlake Hills home where Margaret Morgan had lived alone ever since her daughter passed away. Caleb opened the door. Lucas was playing in the backyard with Sophia. "Hello, Mother," Caleb said, a bit surprised. Margaret rarely visited without calling first. "I heard there's a new woman close to my grandson," she said bluntly, "and he's calling her Mommy." Caleb sighed. Lucas is healing. He needed someone, and Sophia happened to be there. "Sophia?" Margaret raised an eyebrow. "Last name?" "Ramos." The refined woman's brow furrowed. "Who is she? What does she do?" "She's a janitor at my company." Margaret froze. Silence stretched between them. "You're letting a cleaning woman get close to my grandson and call herself mother? It's not what you think. You haven't seen how Lucas has changed. He laughs, he eats, he sleeps peacefully." "And what if she disappears tomorrow? Will my grandson break again?" Margaret's voice was sharp, but her eyes betrayed something deeper. Fear. She had lost a daughter. She wasn't ready to lose her grandson, too. "I understand," Caleb said softly. "But Sophia isn't who you think she is." The following week, Margaret hired a private investigator. "Look into everything, family, background, records, anything that proves she's unfit to be near my grandson," she ordered coldly. The investigator nodded and left her estate. Inside, Margaret was a quiet storm. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't pride. It was fear. Fear that love couldn't come from someone so far beneath them. At Morgan Tech, Sophia continued her work and regular visits with Lucas. But lately, she felt eyes on her. Sometimes, when she left the building, a strange car was parked nearby. One evening, Caleb drove her and Lucas home. As the car pulled up, Margaret was already standing by the front steps. "So, it's you," she said, eyes scanning Sophia from head to toe. "Good evening, ma'am," Sophia said, politely bowing her head. "Who do you think you are?" Caleb stepped in, blocking her. "Mother, please don't do this. You're letting a stranger, someone with no roots, no education, wedge herself into our family. She saved Lucas. Without Sophia, my son might not be alive." Margaret clutched her handbag tightly. "Easy things come easy. You can't entrust my grandson's future to a woman you barely know." Sophia stayed silent. She didn't argue. She just gently led Lucas inside. That night, as Caleb drove her home, Sophia whispered, "If your mother doesn't accept me, I'll step back. I don't want Lucas caught in the middle." Caleb stared at her for a long moment. "I hope she changes, but I don't want to lose you, and I won't let Lucas lose someone again." But Caleb didn't know. Margaret had already begun a plan no one could see coming. That weekend, Caleb found a thick envelope on his desk when he arrived at the office. No sender, just a handwritten note. "You need to know who she really is." He opened it. Inside were papers, photographs, copied documents, all arranged like a professional investigation file. Photos of Sophia with an unfamiliar man, taken from a distance, slightly blurry, made them look close. A copy of an old birth certificate with Sophia Ramos and a section for a child crossed out. A brief note claimed she'd once been accused of child neglect, though the case had later been dismissed. Caleb stared at it all, heart heavy. An uneasy feeling crept in. He didn't want to believe it, but everything looked so official. That afternoon, after Lucas had gone home with the nanny, Caleb asked Sophia to step into his office. "We need to talk," he said, his tone gentle but distant. Sophia sat down, sensing the shift in the air. "What's wrong?" He placed the file on the table. "I don't want to doubt you, but I need to hear from you." Sophia opened the folder. Her eyes froze at the photo. Her and her cousin, the only family she had left after her parents passed. The man who had supported her through her darkest days, after she lost her child. "These things are real, but twisted," she said slowly. "I had a son. He died at 3 from respiratory failure. I never neglected him, but I fell apart afterward. I spent a few months in therapy." Her voice trembled. "I never meant to hide it. I just didn't know how to say it." Caleb said nothing. His mind was a storm, images of Lucas calling her mommy, of her playing with his son so gently. But then, those documents, the doubt. "Who do you think I am?" Sophia asked softly. "Some woman trying to sneak into your family? A gold digger?" No, Caleb struggled. I want to protect Lucas. And I don't? Sophia stood, eyes red. I risked my life for that boy. I love him like my own, and all it takes is a few pieces of paper for you to look at me differently. She turned away, her voice cracking. I'm not angry, just disappointed. Caleb stayed silent, the door closed quietly behind her. And the seed of doubt, though small, had begun to grow inside his heart. And while the seed of doubt quietly grew in Caleb's heart, on the other side, Margaret had begun to execute her final blow, one aimed not just at Sophia, but at the last fragile trust between them. Lucas's 5th birthday was held at Margaret's estate, a picture-perfect celebration, gold and white balloons, a live quartet, a towering sky-blue cake. The guests were all from Austin's elite circles, investors, lawyers, doctors, old friends of Caleb, and one woman whom Margaret reluctantly allowed to attend, Sophia. I invited you today for Lucas, Margaret said, wearing a smile no one could quite read. Sophia arrived in a simple blue dress, no fancy makeup. But the moment Lucas saw her, everything else disappeared. He ran straight into her arms. Throughout the party, Sophia kept a respectful distance. She stood by Lucas, posed for photos, helped him open gifts, and gently warned him when he ate too many sweets. Caleb watched from afar. His eyes softened, as if the doubts inside him were beginning to fade. Until the very end of the party. A sudden scream echoed from the living room. My necklace! It's gone! All heads turned toward Margaret, who stood clutching her chest. The pearl necklace, a family heirloom passed down from her mother, had vanished. No one leaves until it's found, she shouted, scanning the room with sharp eyes. One of the staff spoke up. Ma'am, we just saw Miss Sophia coming out of that room. The room fell silent. One whisper led to another. Someone murmured, Isn't she the cleaning lady? A security guard approached Sophia. Ma'am, we need to check your bag. Sophia froze. I haven't touched anything. It's just a formality, Margaret said smoothly, voice dripping with false concern. Sophia set her bag on the table. They opened it, and there it was, glinting under the lights, the necklace. A gasp rippled through the room. Lucas burst into tears. Sophia stood frozen in shock. The necklace sat there in Sophia's bag, gleaming under the lights, a shining, silent accusation. For a moment, no one spoke. Then the whispers began. But near the dessert table, one nanny muttered under her breath, She wouldn't do that. Another guest, eyes narrowed in doubt, looked between Sophia and Margaret, as if unsure whom to believe, but the silence of the majority was louder than the whispers of the few. Oh my God, did she really take it? She's the cleaning woman, isn't she? I knew something was off from the start. Sophia looked around. Faces that had been smiling minutes ago were now cold, judgmental. Eyes narrowed, lips curled in disdain. Some people even stepped back, as if she carried some contagious shame. Lucas screamed, struggling against the nanny's hold. Mommy didn't take it! Mommy didn't take it! Sophia fell to her knees, voice shaking. You believe me, don't you, Caleb? Caleb stood frozen, his eyes wide, lips parted, but no words came. Just one step, one word, one nod. But he stayed silent. Silent in front of the crowd. Silent while she was humiliated. Silent as his son cried for her, and that silence, to Sophia, hurt more than any accusation. She rose slowly, wiping her tears. The air in the room had turned icy. Eyes followed her every movement. But no one came forward, no one said a word. She bowed her head gently. I can't stay in a place where dignity is so easily destroyed. Lucas sobbed behind her. Mommy, don't go. Sophia pressed her lips together, turned, and walked away like someone with nothing left to lose. The gate closed behind her, just as the birthday music kept playing, oblivious in that grand and heartless house. And as the music continued to play in the mansion, as if nothing had happened, the world of one little boy had already completely fallen apart. From that night on, Lucas changed. He no longer smiled. He didn't speak. He wouldn't touch his crayons or ask for bedtime stories like he used to. The things that once lit him up, folded airplanes, colored markers, the song Twinkle Twinkle, now made him turn away. Caleb tried to fill the void. He took his son to the park, bought expensive toys, hired an in-home child therapist. But Lucas stayed silent, as if his little heart had quietly shut its doors. One night, Caleb heard his son crying softly beneath the covers. "I miss Mommy," Lucas whispered, voice cracking. "She didn't take the necklace. She left because you didn't believe her." Caleb stood outside the door, leaning against the wall, his chest tightening. The words Sophia had said that night, "Just one word of trust, and you stayed silent," echoed louder than ever. 2 days later, Lucas came down with a fever. He grew weak, barely spoke, murmuring Sophia's name in his sleep. The doctor examined him and shook his head. "There's no infection, no virus. He's experiencing a deep emotional breakdown. If this continues, it could affect both his mental and physical development." Caleb sat motionless beside the doctor, his eyes hollow. "I thought I was protecting my son, but maybe I'm the one who hurt him the most." The house grew colder, quieter. No little footsteps, no crayon drawings with the words "Mommy Sophia" taped to the walls. It was as if Sophia had never been there, but she had. And now Caleb was beginning to understand. Sophia hadn't just brought joy to Lucas, she had become a part of his soul. And as Caleb sat by his son's bedside, holding his tiny, feverish hand, he whispered, "I'm sorry. I was wrong." And as Lucas's eyes dimmed in fevered sleep, Caleb knew, if he didn't act now, he would lose his son for the second time. The next day, Caleb pulled out the envelope he had once received. He spread everything across his desk, the photos, the papers, the stamped forms. But this time, he wasn't looking at them through doubt of Sophia. He was doubting everything he once thought was true. He zoomed in on the photo of Sophia with the unfamiliar man and noticed something. The same jawline, the same eyes. Not a lover. Possibly family? Caleb followed an address scribbled on one of the notes, driving hours out of Austin to a quiet rural town. There, he found the man in the photo. Marco, Sophia's cousin. Marco didn't glare. He simply looked tired. "She almost ended her life after losing her child. I was the only one left standing with her. What you saw was survival, not deception." Caleb drove back in silence, his chest tight. He called the private investigator his mother had hired. No answer. After several attempts and a bit of digging, Caleb found out the man had a record for document forgery and civil fraud. Everything began to unravel. That night, Caleb went to Margaret's house. She sat in the reading room, the warm lamplight casting shadows on her silver hair. "What did you do?" he asked flatly. Margaret set down her teacup, unfazed. "I did what I had to do to protect my grandson." "By destroying an innocent woman's reputation? By taking away the one person who loved Lucas most?" Her voice trembled. "You don't understand. After your wife died, Lucas was all I had left. I couldn't let someone like her replace her." "She wasn't replacing anyone," Caleb said, choking up. "She was healing Lucas, and you tore that apart." Margaret didn't speak for a long time. Then, quietly, tears filled her eyes, the first in years. If I lose Lucas too, then I truly have nothing left." Caleb stood. "If you still love your grandson, you'll make this right. Now." The truth was out. But sometimes the truth isn't enough to heal, because the deepest wounds aren't from what people do, but from their silence when you needed their belief the most. After that day, Sophia vanished from Morgantech. No one knew where she had gone. She quit her job, turned off her phone, and moved to a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of Austin, a place where no one knew her past or the little boy who once called her Mommy. She wasn't running. She was just trying to breathe, to find a place without suspicious eyes or the kind of silence that hurts more than words. But her heart was never still. Every night in her dreams, she saw that little face and heard that voice. "Mommy, don't go." Then, one rainy afternoon, came a knock at the door. She opened it, unsurprised to see Caleb. But what stopped her was Margaret, her silver hair wet from the rain, her eyes heavy with something Sophia had never seen in her before: humility. Sophia said nothing. She waited. "Lucas is in the hospital," Caleb said, his voice hoarse. "The doctors say he won't eat, won't speak. He calls for you in his sleep." Margaret clutched her purse, then bowed her head low. "I was wrong. I don't expect your forgiveness. But if there's even a shred of compassion left in you, please come see my grandson, just once." The air felt thick. Sophia clenched her fists, heart pounding with noise she couldn't name. She had sworn never to return. But this wasn't about the past. This wasn't about the adults. This was about Lucas. She nodded. The hospital room was sterile and cold. Lucas lay still, his tiny body lost in white sheets. His eyes were closed. Only the heart monitor beeped, slow and faint. Sophia stepped closer, knelt beside his bed. "Lucas," she whispered, voice trembling. "I'm here." No response. She gently squeezed his small hand, hope flickering inside her. Then a twitch. His fingers curled around hers, recognizing the warmth. His lips moved weakly. "Mommy." The heart monitor spiked. Margaret covered her mouth, tears falling freely. Caleb turned away, his eyes red. Sophia didn't speak. She simply lowered her forehead to his hand. And in that moment, all the blame, pain, and silence melted into one thing: love. Lucas began to recover at an almost miraculous pace. Just 3 days with Sophia by his side, and he was eating again, smiling faintly, speaking in soft, broken sentences. His once clouded eyes slowly lit up. No more fear, only peace. The kind that comes from knowing the one person you trust is there. The doctors called it a positive emotional response. But Sophia knew it was love. She never left the hospital. She stayed every night, resting beside Lucas's bed, whispering bedtime stories like a mother soothing her child. During those first few nights, Caleb lingered silently outside the door, watching them, too ashamed to enter. There was so much he wanted to say, but he hadn't yet found the words, or the courage, until the 4th night. He stepped into the room while Sophia was reading quietly to Lucas. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" he asked softly. Sophia looked up, then nodded. She placed the book aside, kissed Lucas gently on the forehead, and followed Caleb into the hallway. The corridor was quiet, dimly lit, scented faintly with antiseptic and loneliness. Caleb took a deep breath. "I'm sorry, not just for doubting you, but for letting you stand alone when you needed me to believe in you the most." Sophia didn't respond immediately. She leaned against the wall, fingers intertwined. "I'm not angry anymore," she said at last. "I just stopped expecting anything." Caleb nodded, eyes downcast. "I understand." Then he looked up, meeting her gaze, and for the first time there was no pride, no guarded walls. Just a man who had lost something precious and was trying to make it right. "I love you, Sophia, not because you're there for Lucas, but because you brought life back into both of our worlds." Sophia was quiet for a long moment. Then she smiled, gently, wearily. "I forgive you, but not for you. For Lucas, he deserves a whole family." Caleb nodded, a tear sliding down his cheek. And in that moment, no more words were needed. Between all the mistakes, pain, and silence, they chose to begin again, not from the beginning, but from where it all had fallen apart. From the silence and the breaking, they chose to move forward, not to forget the past, but to rewrite it with love and grace. 1 year after Sophia laid her hand on Lucas's fevered fingers in that hospital room, she walked down a narrow path in a quiet backyard garden, filled with white daisies and blooming lavender. No grand gown, no luxurious hall, just soft sunlight, a gentle breeze, children's laughter, and a few dozen close friends and family sitting on wooden benches. Caleb waited at the end of the path, hands trembling slightly, as Sophia approached in a simple white dress, her hair tied back, her gaze warm like the setting sun. Lucas, now nearly 6, was the ring-bearer, proudly wearing his tiny suit, secretly hiding candy in his pocket. As the officiant read their vows, no one cried, but everyone felt it, a deep, quiet peace. It didn't feel like a beginning, but rather a return to something that had always meant to be. That evening, as lanterns glowed above their backyard and guests shared warm laughter, Caleb whispered into Sophia's ear, "This is the life I never thought I'd get back." And life, as if listening, answered with a miracle. 1 month later, Sophia gave birth to a baby girl. They named her Grace. Because everything good that came to us, Caleb said, wasn't by chance. It was grace. Grace grew up surrounded by laughter, sunshine, and warm afternoons in the garden. Lucas took his role as big brother very seriously, always the first to run when she cried, and the proud owner of the worst version of Twinkle Twinkle that Grace somehow loved most. Margaret visited often now. No longer the cold, sharp figure of the past, she would sit beneath the shade trees, holding Grace and whispering softly to Sophia, "Thank you for forgiving me." Sophia would simply smile, because some things don't need words, only presence. The house wasn't grand, but it was full of light and laughter. In the living room, among many framed family photos, one stood out, a younger Lucas, arms wrapped tightly around Sophia, from the day he first called her Mommy. When guests visited and asked, "Where did your family begin?" Sophia always smiled, glancing at Caleb and Lucas. "It began with a wound," she'd say, "and it grew through love." 5 years after the small wedding beneath the lavender trees, Caleb and Sophia co-founded the Hart Families Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to those who had walked through loss. Single parents, grieving workers, families who had lost children and didn't know how to start again. They didn't build a charity, they built a community. Here, there was no pity, only compassion, no lectures, just warm hands ready to hold yours. Lucas, now over 10, became the foundation's face. At gatherings, he often shared his story, in a calm voice with eyes wiser than his age. "My mom didn't give birth to me, but she's the only one who stayed when I needed someone most. Sometimes, love doesn't come from blood. It comes from the place that matters most, the heart." People often cried when they heard him, not out of pity, but because they saw themselves in him, alone once, hopeless once, and then saved by a love with no name. Margaret no longer appeared at family events. She understood that forgiveness sometimes doesn't come fully. But now and then she would stand from afar, watching Sophia cradle Grace, Lucas laughing beside his father, and Caleb holding Sophia's hand as they handed gifts to children with no home. She didn't come to interfere. She came to pray. Sometimes she brought flowers, left quietly by the gate, never signed. Other times she sat in her car, watching through misted windows as Lucas hugged Sophia tightly, wondering if forgiveness could ever reach a woman like her. to pray for the happiness she once nearly destroyed, to pray for the kind of love she finally understood. Too late, perhaps, but never unworthy. In the Hart family's office, beside a simple heart-shaped logo, one sentence is carved gently into the wall. Love doesn't come from blood. It comes from the only place that truly knows how to love, the heart. Just like the first time a boy looked into a stranger's eyes and called her Mommy.